All right, welcome to our Diversity, Inclusion, and Belonging Influencers group meeting. I'm Jackie Porter. I'm a co-chair here with Sherrod. We have a couple of items in the agenda. First one being some follow-ups from the last meeting. Q1 planning. We kind of did a carryover from last quarter because a lot of the activities didn't finish up, so we didn't really do a Q1 planning. But I would like for us to kick off Q2 planning in the next week or so we can start solidifying some ideas and maybe working on getting OKRs embedded in some organizations to complete things like neurodiversity training or some other type of training related to a DIB value. All ears on that. What I can do is get an issue open and we can start collecting ideas with the team members and the influencer group, and then solidify, vote, do some sort of democratic way of picking what we want to pick in Q2 and go with that. How does that sound? Okay. And then the last follow-up item from last meeting, there was this question that Sherrod had, and Liam, this will be for you and Sharita, around building out the TMRG section in the engagement survey. I don't know when the next engagement survey is, but based off of this last call, it was, I guess Sherrod was asking if we should add more information in the pulse survey about TMRG belonging and how many people are in them.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that's something, because we're not going to do a DIB specific survey. So I think that will piggyback on the engagement survey and make sure that we have a few more DIB related questions on there, things around TMRGs, things around belonging as well. I'm not 100% sure actually when it is the next one. I think that we did the last one in April or May. That sounds familiar. But I can get back to you on when that is going to happen.
Super. I'll go ahead and tag this comment then, and then we can follow up in the Slack channel on when that is, and if we need to create an issue to collect those different questions, we can. Awesome. I feel like I'm just talking at y'all. I'm sorry.
It's all good.
Okay.
You're doing great work, Jackie.
And I don't like this. I don't like just like talking at people. Okay. So this point 2, I linked to an issue that Sherrod is leading. This is the gender underrepresented group survey. So there's this work stream that Sherrod's been leading on asking why are we seeing low representation of gender underrepresented gender minorities in our surveys, and we've interviewed a handful of TMRGs. We're still scheduled to interview Black at GitLab and early, I think it's career TMRG. So we have a couple more to go, and then hopefully we can compile some results and take learnings forward on that. I think that, go ahead.
And I think some of the insights have become not just only gender as well, like gender specific. I can't say that word today. But it has kind of brought it into a more broader why do URGs in general and at-risk groups in general do not participate. And it's even bringing out themes just kind of from just a team member perspective as well. So a lot of the things that are coming out aren't necessarily URG specific, but are actually a little bit more generalized around how we can improve engagement more broadly anyway.
Love that. That'll be exciting to apply that. Great. This next one. So Peter is assigned to this task. Him and I had a sync before SCO or sales kickoff to help improve this AMER representation or culture inside of GitLab. We might want to be doing an APAC one given the attendance in this call. But it was interesting to hear Peter's approach is going to start to conduct some research on EMEA time zone teammates to get their sentiment and how they feel about representation, and if they feel like they're reflected or their time zone is respected. And then the idea is to craft a recommendation plan for execs, leadership managers to then begin rolling out, and then to pilot some of those recommendations with the focus group. He has a couple of calls set up with the, I think, Global Voices TMRG to learn a little bit more about their perspective. So hopefully he'll have an update in the next couple of weeks on what he's learned and how we can move forward.
Yeah, I think that's great. And I think that the AMER time zone, I think that, I'm looking at it from an APAC perspective, where we tend to not get too included as much, or like APAC generally falls at like 9 o'clock in the morning for Australia, which is 6 a.m. for, say, the Philippines or Japan and places like that. And so we definitely should be looking at that a little bit more. The problem is that whilst we want to have these calls in APAC, for example, we still need to have somebody to host these calls. And we don't want those people that are going to be hosting the calls to be working crazy long work days as well. So it's trying to find that balance, and what can be the solve. I think the biggest frustration that I've heard from people has been around their ability to participate. So decisions get made without their participation because they've already been made on the call prior. And I think that's the big thing that people want to solve. It's not necessarily, right, I need to be on a synchronous call. It's how can I participate when I'm not on the synchronous call, because my time zone is affected by that. So those are maybe some food for thought things as well as you're kind of working through that.
Yeah, I started writing it out, but one of the things I've been wondering about is just whether it seems like sometimes we schedule the regular AMER call like first in the sequence. And so a lot of questions are answered and decisions are made there, and then folks follow up. I think that's necessary sometimes depending on the team and, you know, who's involved and whatnot. But like in some cases, it might be worth like organizing to schedule the APAC AMER overlap call first and then having the follow-up. Like in cases where we're trying to represent everyone, even in like AMAs and stuff like that. Because like with AMAs, you see it happen pretty frequently, I think, where whatever happens first, a bunch of the questions get asked, and then everyone else kind of comes in and goes, oh, well, I've had all my questions asked. And it feels like there isn't as much feeling of participation when I've been in that situation myself. Just as an idea to maybe put on the list.
Yeah. And to piggyback off that, Daniel, there was the AMA recently around the redundancies and things. There was a bunch of questions that wasn't answered in the US call, and they were all then put on the APAC call to be answered, and that didn't leave any room for the APAC people to ask any questions, which I thought was just like wild. I was like, I get it. We want these questions answered, but there's a bunch of people that also want to have their questions answered too. So things like that, and being respectful of other team members in other time zones is super important. So guidelines around stuff like that should be put into place too.
Yeah, that's definitely something that I see. The other thing, I wonder whether that's just a function of meeting efficiency as well. One of the things that I've been kind of trying to figure out how we could manage is the idea that when you've got questions that are actually asked and answered, we read them out anyway. Even though, like, if you're async, you're always reading it. And if you're actually in the meeting, is that the best use of time? Not to say that people don't want to have their concerns addressed and verbalized and considered with as much, you know, thought as any other question that comes up live. But like, if it's already asked and answered, just move on. Ask if there are any follow-up questions, maybe from the original person that wrote the question out, to make sure they had actually their question answered, but then just move on and take it as read. I wonder, because that's what we saw in some of those AMAs around the layoffs, was they got very involved. People asked follow-up questions, and then we just didn't get through a lot of them. And so we're trying to treat the people's questions with respect who took the time to write it in there, but then that just extends the time frame for everything, right? So like, anyway, I think there's some questions in my head around meeting efficiency that relate to how we relate to questions that are asked and answered. It's almost like you want the author to come in, and the author of a question come in and say, asked and answered, I'm good. Let's just move on.
Yeah, to kind of pull on that thread, usually in an agenda like that, once my question's been answered in the text and I'm satisfied by it, I'll add a read only. But sometimes I end up going back and forth like in the text, and then I get asked like, can you just verbalize your question? Because we're already going, back and forth like 5 layers deep. So I think that that the read only thing seems to work really well. Maybe we can add a AMER to handbook to suggest that.
I think there already is one. I remember seeing it recently. But yeah, the read only works best. But I don't think there's any way of getting around the issue of having the first call and then follow-up questions, no matter what time zone we put it in. I actually think, from an APAC perspective, it actually works well because there's a US call, we can see all the answers, and then that gives us an opportunity to dive deeper and follow up on things that maybe weren't clear. But I just don't see you can get around it because there'll always be someone that goes first.
Yep. And then in some cases, we announce news the day of. So then maybe we, like we want to get through all of the feedback, and it'll either be APAC only or, there's no way to stagger it with a time zone depending on when we announce things. So, okay. Well, this was a really great thread. I think maybe in the Q2 issue, I'll mention something about APAC representation, or we can also talk about improving meeting efficiency or inclusion of meetings, maybe to extract the time zone problem and really just create better practices on holding meetings. So I'll take that forward. Any other things on this item? Okay, great. The next one is this suggestion on doing OKR alignment for neurodiversity training. So I wonder if this will be something that we want to put for Q2. But we can discuss that async. Oh, go ahead.
The last 2 quarters within engineering, we had neurodiversity training. Is it a company-wide issue, or is it one that was prioritized in engineering where we had a large number of the teams complete their training, but maybe just wasn't company-wide? Is that what you're referring to?
Yes. So this sales didn't do that. I know product didn't do that. So it would be more like, how do we as the influencer group help influence our management chains to make this training a requirement? I think it's great that engineering did that. So you're excluded. Liam, it's just me and you that we can talk to our leadership about.
OKRs seem like a really effective way of doing it. Do you know if we have any data by department as to what the uptake has been?
We do. I can definitely get the data. Our completion rate is still really quite low. I think we made a really good, we made most progress with our managers. So we kind of took it away from let's have all of team members do it to let's get all of our managers trained up. We probably got about a 30% uptake. So it's still quite low from where we want it to be. I think what we want to do is try and get all team members to take some form of neurodiversity training. We have some plans to do some bite-sized trainings over the next year. So those and neurodiversity might be one of the first ones that we do. So at least there's some training that's going out there. I think what we want from the influencer group and the leadership DIB council is kind of a 2-pronged approach, because we're noticing it's it's a big thing, especially for neurodiverse folks in their inclusion. It's more around understanding and what those accommodations could potentially be and the like, but then also removing diagnosis from it as well, because one of the key things is that there's so many people that have not been diagnosed with, say, ADHD or autism or things like that, all across the world, not just within GitLab. But how do we make sure that their learning styles and working styles are accommodated for. And so that's what we want to try and get across, and get people to kind of recognize that those learning and working styles as well. So yeah, we want to try and get it to 100% all team members. We're just kind of struggling about how we're going to do that. So yeah, that's where this group will come in, and the Leadership DIB Council will come in as well.
Yeah, I just one comment on that. I think OKRs are one approach, because generally people feel pretty connected to that. There's also, I think, just promoting it and seeing like the benefits of people becoming aware of these kinds of things, and the kinds of environments that it creates when you have a more aware population. But we can talk more about that in our Q2 issue when I create it.
But yeah, completely agree. And that's why we're looking at the Leadership DIB Council as well, because that's majority senior directors and VPs, and they can start building that into their management chains. With the influencer group, we have heaps of directors. We've got two directors and a VP on here, so you're able to influence that down into your management chains as well. So that's the idea of what we want to try and do, and then add that promotion part as well where we can.
Yeah, and I just had a comment. I just like a lot of these trainings that we do, and I don't mean to, I mean, in one sense, I'm definitely packaging that together with this conversation around neurodiversity training. But a lot of the trainings we do just end up being box checking from once they get down to a team level. And so I worry that sometimes just actually takes away the value that we really think these things have in terms of people's engagement and feeling of being part of the team. I wish there's a way to measure those outcomes more than just checking boxes that the training is done. Jackie, you had a comment after that.
Yeah, the results here are going to show up in our pulse survey, and they're going to show up in the engagement numbers of people who identify and who are reported as being neurodiverse. There's lots of research to suggest that the first step to empowering those underrepresented groups is to make the majority population aware of those groups, so that there's sensitivities to those populations. And in absence of having tangible metrics that we can point to, education and awareness is the first method for change management here. Because what we're doing is making our organization aware and change their perceptions about neurodiversity in order then to create actions. So the first step we have to do is get everyone on the same page and then have the same shared understanding of the neurodiverse population. So part of that is box checking. Then like next quarter, we can focus on things like events that people support or attend related to neurodiversity. But if they don't know about it and they're not aware about it, they're not going to be able to acknowledge their own biases and make a difference. The results will show up eventually in our company that way, though.
Yeah, and I think, and it also will show up. I'm obviously very close with the Diverse Abilities TMRG, which is heavily influenced by neurodiverse folks at this point. And it might not be an immediate, like, it's gone up by 10% kind of vibe, but it might be a more anecdotal stories about how those people that are effective and already identify how their perceptions has changed on what it means to be neurodiverse at GitLab. Things, and we can even measure it on just really simple things like how many meetings end up having closed captions on their meetings. Things like that. That means that it has had a change in mindset on people actually doing that for neurodiverse folks. Because I know that I think there was like 30% of people within our Diverse Abilities TMRG, they want closed captions on all meetings because that's how they process information better. So if we start seeing that happen more often and we start seeing those changes, we can say there's a success rate there. Unfortunately, because we can't necessarily always ask people to identify, it's unfortunate, but also fortunate for those that don't want to. We can't just go, right, neurodiverse folks, have we changed? We can't do that. It's not really possible, but we can get some data from anecdotal stuff and how behaviors have changed at GitLab as well.
And that's kind of what I started writing out another comment in the agenda there, Liam, and that's kind of my point. You used a great example there, which is having closed captioning on all meetings as an example of something that we can say, hey, we do this at GitLab.
Yeah,
It's it. Like just turn that feature on in Zoom all the time for everybody.
Yeah.
You know, that to me is like we can take proactive action in areas where it's understood that some folks find that really beneficial to enable them to work effectively. I don't think we need to, this, you know, cis white dude, not neurodiverse, as, you know, saying his opinion here. So thanks for listening. But like, we don't need to wait to hear back from folks that's something that would help them feel more part of the team and more empowered. We could just do that. And so that's kind of what I'm driving at here. I love the training. I've done the training myself. You know, I want to understand the actions that we know we can take to help improve the situation and just go do that. Whilst we're doing all the other stuff too, right?
And I think that's a great point, but that action's already been taken, but the behavior has not changed. And that's what we need to get to. So in our meeting guidelines, I think Nicole put it in, is that all meetings should have closed captioning. There you go. And all meetings should have closed captioning, but it doesn't happen. So, and there's no default in Zoom to make sure that all meetings have closed captioning. So that's the that's the issue. So it needs to be a behavior from the hosts of meetings and things like that. As far as we can see, we've tried, you can't change it, that it's automatic. So, yeah. Yeah.
Okay. And that's something that I'm not doing, but I could totally be doing. So
but that's exactly it. Yeah. And there's so many of those things related to neurodiversity. Like, you know, if people have embedded sound inside of their slides, that's not good for a lot of people that have different neurodiverse conditions. So like, this is where, you know, the training helps with, okay, here's all the things that we need to be cognizant of. And then I completely agree with you, Dan, like how can we reinforce those behaviors? So now I'm in every meeting and I'll make sure that we put closed captions on too. I'll remind people in the chat so we can hold everyone accountable as influencers here. I think that's a great suggestion too.
Yeah. And we're going to have a lot of things coming up, which will definitely require the DIB influencer group's help. Things like taking I don't know what the word is, but taking things that will reveal your learning style and your working style and how that relates to other people's learning and working styles and things like that, which will help reinforce. Because the thing with neurodiversity is a very individual. There are lots of common threads around the accommodations that people require, but they're almost never. It's never like a nice neat box of what people need. And so what we need is individuals to start understanding and realizing what behaviors their team members might need, especially from a managerial perspective. And then we look at how this affects things like the perception of that person, because somebody that is autistic may have different social awareness and social cues and may not understand what neurotypical people social cues are, and how does that perception of their work in the workplace, how does that change and stuff like that. So there's going to be a lot of things that will be more around your perception and how that changes behavior as well. So there will be things that we can do actionable, which is closed captioning, which is sound level on videos, things like even like our assemblies and things like that. And if we do virtual contribute, how do those videos and interactions kind of take place? And then there'll be other things that will be more around perception and how we can get people to change their behaviors a little bit, which will be very difficult, but something we have to try.
Yeah, thank you for that. And I'm like, do we have a handbook page that lists all of this stuff that we kind of know? Is it because I missed it, obviously?
Yeah. No, we definitely have that, so I can send that through.
Yeah, that'd be great. And I think people know me to be the type of person that will just go, hey, don't say, guys, don't do this. Yeah. Please do this instead to help folks. Yeah. Like feel very strongly about this stuff. And therefore, if I'm not doing it, admittedly, I've been kind of moving around a lot in the last 6 months. So maybe I haven't as much capacity as I normally do. but I will ask people to like live up to these values, and I will make sure it happens. But I missed it, and therefore either that's on me, which is totally cool. But I would love to have that list and be able to refer people to it.
And that's completely fine. This is all about awareness, right? And same with you, Dan. Everybody needs to get their awareness up. It's things are going to be missed. People are going to make mistakes. It's 100% going to happen. There's just so much going on. There's so much information. It's an information overload. And this is why something like taking the training or taking a bite-size bit of information and getting a little bit of understanding will start building out and let that permeate a little bit more. Because the handbook is just super long. It's going to be so different. It's not, then people aren't always going to find it. But if they can retain 2 bits of information on, right, I need to make sure that what this person's learning style is, and then I need to make sure that they do closed captioning, that's already a big win, right? So if we can start there, and then all of a sudden you go, okay, now I know about dyspraxia, and I now know about how dyslexia represents itself at work. I know how this represents itself at work. We slowly build that into the culture. So don't be so hard on yourself, Dan.
It's kind of my hobby, and I can't help it. I'm very, very into my hobbies, and being hard on myself is one of them, apparently.
It's your favorite one, actually.
I wouldn't say it's my favorite, but it's up there.
Okay, awesome. Anything else on this one?
Can be good.
Okay, great. How should we work in the future? So I found that I put this meeting out there on the calendar, and then as the co-chair, didn't engage with any y'all. So I want to find a way that we can have like a continuous engagement and have sort of, both push notifications to the channel on like, this is the things that are happening in our influencer group, but also how to get information from you all. Like, what are you seeing in your groups? What are some trends that you're observing in the company? So I have this suggestion that maybe we create like a bi-weekly issue that we can reflect on things that are happening around and provide an update on the initiatives that are going. It could also be a Slack thread, but I'm open to hearing your thoughts here. What do you think?
Where do we see the most engagement at the moment? And I know that, like, I think the influencer group still needs a bit of a push. I'm not gonna lie. I think it needs a bit of a push and get and for people to participate for sure. So I think wherever the main engagement is happening right now, I think that's where it needs to be. Slack is easy engagement, I think. I don't know if that's the same sentiment from others. I think the engineers might disagree with me, but yeah, it just depends. There as little windows as possible to open to engage. I think that's that will be the ultimate path in my mind. The main thing is I just want to see every single member of the DIB influencer group providing those updates, providing input and insight, and taking on actions. And that's why as we move forward, we can have smaller actions so that people, from a time capacity perspective, are able to participate. But I just want it to the easiest way possible for people to engage and hopefully get everybody to engage as well. Because if they're not, then we can just shrink the group. That's how my mind has been going recently. It's like, if we have more smaller group that is super engaged, I'm happy with that. But if everybody's engaged, then that's even better. So.
Okay. It does feel like since I went on parental leave when I got this assignment and then came back, I was able to like look at the channel and like see same kind of faces and people that were engaging in the channel before. And it does feel like it goes like weeks without it being the Slack channel being engaged in. And so I think that I'm not quite sure on the right forum. And I don't know if it's because, there is such like a diversity of time zones. So people don't really know how to engage in Slack or how to pick up threads or, what that looks like. But we can definitely, respond
And I
in
think it takes
chat.
somebody to just galvanize it. And Jackie, I think, you're doing a great job of that. And I think if you maybe set like a bi-weekly thing where you say, I'm going to be posting this asynchronously each week, and then we have our monthly call, I think that will really help get people to at least start engaging and see those notifications and see things happening.
Perfect.
So,
And then
any thoughts, Dan and Bartek?
Dan, I see you have an item in the agenda.
Yeah, I've added this thought afterwards because it occurred to me, because that's what I've been dealing with, is just everyone has a lot going on right now. You know, economy, we have layoffs, lots of survivor's guilt, stress around org changes. So there's been a lot for people right now, and that doesn't reflect necessarily what has been happening, which I totally agree with how you're both seeing it. I think my biggest thing is when I have a bit of time and I want to come in and address something, I'm actually sure what I need to be doing, what's best value with the time I have available. So having that direction that we're figuring out right now as we're talking about it, obviously, which is great. I think once we have that, that will just enable folks to come in with the limited time they have and really contribute in whatever capacity they can. And that's kind of where I'm at right now, just limited time and wanting to help, wanting to add value, wanting to move these goals forward. But, you know, I really like, which issue is open, where is it at, who's doing it, who do I need to talk to? It's like hard for me to figure that out in like the 20 or 30 minutes I have to check in.
Yeah.
That's a good point. So I do wonder, Liam, if we can think of like hygiene activities that we would like people to contribute to. So maybe like there's, you know, a monthly activity that we have around adding different things to the handbook, or promoting different events, or promoting different actions. Like, for example, hey, this month we're really focusing on people being aware of neurodiversity. Here's our handbook page. If you can show this in your meetings, if you can get people to see this or talk about it, that would be really great. And then people can come check in and give the responses. Like, I think that's, it can be really low lift. It doesn't have to be, you know, them doing like a full-blown project.
100% agree. I think having that kind of like, bi-weekly newsletter saying, these are the actions we want you to take. Here's some posts that you can post within your groups and with your peers. Amazing. We could definitely do stuff like that. And I think that is definitely something that's low lift for sure. It's about having, I think the big thing is about having that plan of saying, this is what we're going to be focusing on. So is everybody's aware that the next 3 months we're focusing on neurodiversity? Awesome. And then we can just keep saying, right, these are the things that we want to do. And I'm happy to help with all of that. I'm happy to help and put posts together and things along those lines and whatnot. So yeah, I'm really down for that.
Okay, I like that. So maybe when I open up this Q2 issue, we can collect all of the populations or groups of individuals that we feel like are not being treated in the way that we would want them to be treated at GitLab. Maybe that's not the right way to put it. Like maybe the pulse surveys like are not reflected the higher levels of engagement, and we want to increase engagement in certain populations. So it would be good for us to create our annual plan, and we have like, you know, each quarter we want to focus on a particular group or a particular initiative. I think that would be a really powerful way to make some results focused choices here. My product manager is coming out. I can feel it now. Like I can feel that. I can see the roadmap in my head. I'm like, okay, this is turning into a product. This is great. So we can create the annual plan, then we can create iterations on that and get people really engaged in promoting these things. I think it's important that we create some structure around each quarter and help people self-serve. Yeah,
100%. And I think that's that's been the missing link of being able to get people to, I think we're, even as a DIB team, I think we're too like, oh yeah, it will get done, or people will start engaging and they'll create, but I feel like, I don't want to say this this phrase, but spoon feeding a little bit will help allow stuff to happen.
Yeah.
Because as Dan mentioned, people are time poor. So
I mean, and spoon feeding might not be your favorite terminology, but the reality is it's exactly what I said.
Yeah.
smaller pieces that people can come in and work on in this limited amount of time where they can contribute.
Yeah.
And it's just a different way to phrase the same thing, I think.
Yeah.
So I totally agree with that.
Yeah.
And that would be better for me as I settle out in my new job. I might have a little bit more time to actually like dig in a bit more, but to be honest, I just don't right now.
Yeah.
And I appreciate that some other folks don't as well. So
Yeah.
cool.
I appreciate you
and-
attending with limited capacity.
Well, and I think one thing I would say for me in particular, though, is like, if you all are working on something and you need some help and you're like, hey, I'm working on this Q2 plan, I could use some help on this thing, I can jump in real fast and help. It doesn't have to be like I've planned out this like project manager-esque like layout, as Jackie was saying before. It's not that I need to be like really like, here's each step you will take. It's more like, here's a limited component of what we're trying to do. Can you help us with this? That would be something I could easily jump in and make happen pretty quickly. But it's more like doing the thinking, figuring out the plan, deciding the direction, and all this like larger thought type stuff that is harder for me to just get involved in right now.
Okay, so some actions in here. I'll create the Q2 planning issue. I will work, Liam, with you to kind of identify what is the group that we want to pick for the Q2, and then we can plan Q3 and plan Q4. And then I'll create a couple more issues for activities that we want to start conducting in Q2, and we'll go from there. Awesome. Anything else? Super. I'll get this recording into Unfiltered and then post in the channel. Thank you all so much for your time.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Appreciate it. Bye.